Hey, good morning, everyone. Just give me about a minute to get set up here. Hey, good morning, everyone. Just give me about a minute to get set up. All right, we are live on the internet. Sweet. All right, everyone, give me a shout. Let me know where you're at, and I will get started here with our briefing just a little bit. But everything is pretty much working out forecast-wise the way we expected it to, which is unfortunately not a great sight if you're watching from southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, Alabama. But here we go. We've got our record-breaking third hurricane expected to make landfall in Louisiana later on, heading towards just before sunset, we believe. Probably sometime between 4 and 5 o'clock this evening, Central Daylight Time. And it looks like landfall will be on the Louisiana coastline southwest of New Orleans with a hard right turn right over greater New Orleans and maybe a second landfall in southwestern Mississippi. If you know how the coast bends, there's kind of a lake in there northeast of New Orleans called Lake Bourne, and it kind of protects Slidell and those areas from the worst of storm surge coming in from the southeast. There's some barrier islands out there, the Chandeleur and the Breton Sounds, and unfortunately Mississippi is left vulnerable to perhaps some very high storm surge because of that. All right. Hey Raymond, how you doing? Darlington, South Carolina. Know it well. We're going to get to the Carolinas and what we're looking at there. Let me show you guys a broad view of the tropics so you can see what we're looking at. Obviously, Hurricane Zeta is the largest feature out there. That is over the middle of the Gulf of Mexico and accelerating northward. We'll make a right turn later today and track from southwest to northeast across southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and then overnight tonight it'll cross Alabama, and then tomorrow we're looking at the remains weakening but accelerating over northern Georgia and the western Carolinas. And you can see on the satellite all of the intense weather is on the northern and eastern side of the storm, which you can expect this time of the year. The reason for that is the way the jet stream is configured. It blows the thunderstorms off to the north and east. I apologize, we have trash and recycling pickup this morning, so if you hear that in the background, they are getting all the trash out of here. Elsewhere, we look pretty quiet in the tropics. We do have one area we're watching, which will be approaching the Leeward Islands here in the northern Caribbean. That's what I get for leaving the window open this time of year when it's nice and kind of comfy out. And that is something we'll watch in the Caribbean here probably when we get towards Election Day and beyond. It's still got a while before it looks like it develops into anything. And then other than that, there's really nothing else to talk about. I mean, it is almost November, so this time of the year things certainly get quieter. But, you know, this is kind of an unprecedented storm for Louisiana. They don't typically see storms of this magnitude so late in the year. This is something we would more commonly see in September than, say, late October. But this has been the year 2020, and it certainly has been kind of a bizarre year, to say the least. So I'm going to take you back to the satellite loop from yesterday, and you can see the tight core of Zeta held together. It lost steam yesterday as it spent some time over the Yucatan, but last night began to explode. We had an eye form, and thunderstorms have become more concentrated in the center. And one thing I will make clear to you guys is that because of the structure of the storm, you know, a difference in this case of 20 miles is going to make a world of difference as to where the worst of the weather is going to be, even extremely farther inland. You may be 40 miles west of the center and kind of it just feels like a gentle breeze, and then you're nearer to the east of the center and we're dealing with all kinds of mayhem potentially. So some people are going to win big time and some people are going to lose big time out of this storm. But you can see the satellite image yesterday, the core of the storm held together well, and that's what's allowed it to strengthen over marginal waters. The wind shear has been pretty low, so that's obviously helping. I'm not going to say rapid intensification, but certainly steady intensification is what we've seen overnight. And wind speeds have come up to about 90 miles per hour. We do have aircraft that are flying into the storm right now. There are 2 planes in there. And they've measured winds here on the eastern side of the storm of hurricane force at flight level, 90 knots, which is a strong Category 1 storm. If you remember Isaias, this is a little bit stronger than that was. Not quite as strong as Delta was earlier this month. Feels like last month, but this month. But definitely you can see it's made that northern turn, and the biggest point I'd like to make is that the wind field has expanded on the eastern side. If you look at these aircraft report, you can see this area of purple wind, which is at flight level, which is about 15,000 feet up, hurricane force wind, expanded from about 30 miles here to about 50 miles. It's actually grown, and these winds have come up with each pass that the hurricane hunter has made through the middle of the storm. So obviously it's still strengthening despite the fact that the waters are starting to cool off. The other thing too is that you'll notice it's actually speeding up, and that's got an advantage to the storm structure. The faster a storm moves, the less likely it's going to weaken. If you think about a boulder rolling down a hill and hitting a brick wall, obviously the longer the hill and the faster the boulder is going, the more impact it'll have. That's kind of an example I want to make. It's got more momentum because it's moving faster. So while the water does get cooler and wind shear does pick up close to landfall tonight, it's not going to be enough to stop this storm, from really weakening. It's probably not going to be at its strongest when it hits, but it will be close. It'll be a little while before we get this thing to tail off. Yes, we all need a break. I mean, it's freaking 9 in the morning here, and I'm going to have to get to work soon, but we definitely need a break. But, the Gulf is warm, and here's our steering flow, this high-pressure system, which has protected Florida this time, which is crazy because 4 or 5 days ago it looked like Florida or even east of Florida. And, I took a gamble and rolled the dice and lost, saying that Florida was likely going to have a hurricane threat. Well, unfortunately, because this high has just been so strong, it's, again, a Louisiana-Mississippi storm, which is just really unlucky. I mean, we're talking, the 3rd hurricane to hit Louisiana, and I think the 5th hurricane to hit the Gulf Coast this season. Yeah, because we had Hannah back in July that hit South Texas, and then we had Laura, which hit southwest Louisiana in August, and then we had Sally, which hit far southeast Alabama, northwest Florida. I believe that was early September. I don't know, it feels like it's been forever. And then we had Delta early this month in southwest Louisiana. Now we have Zeta late this month in southeast Louisiana. So New Orleans has been lucky so far, but that's very quickly going to change. And this is going to be, in my opinion, one of New Orleans' worst 10 hurricanes based on the wind that New Orleans will be impacted by. And there's a slight chance that maybe the city itself escapes the very worst, and it ends up going to the east of the city, but it's not something that I'm putting a lot of weight into. All right, so I will show you Louisiana real quick, and then we'll move on to farther inland. Here is 10 a.m. Central Time. We're going to start to see tropical storm force wind gusts approaching the coastline. And then as we get into the afternoon, winds pick up in New Orleans around mid-afternoon, and we'll likely have tropical storm force winds, the kind that can cause some power outages as soon as 3 or 4 o'clock south of New Orleans. Here is the eye of the hurricane eyeing Terrebonne Parish in southeastern Louisiana. If you're familiar with that area, Homa's up here. Lafourche Parish is a little farther east. That's where Thibodaux is. And then we've got Jefferson Parish right up here, Barataria Bay, which will funnel a lot of this water on shore. And then Plaquemine Parish, St. Bernard Parish, and Orleans. So all of this is metro New Orleans, but the farther south and east you get, obviously the population drops off quite a bit. But the storm is speeding up, and it's taking the strongest winds on the eastern side of it. So as this storm makes landfall, looks like in Terrebonne Bay, right around 4 o'clock this evening, or this afternoon, Those strongest winds could get up to 121 miles per hour, the instantaneous wind gust, according to the NAM model. So the storm is not done strengthening yet, and it's going to pick up a little bit of momentum as it speeds up. And we're likely to see 100 mile per hour plus winds over the eastern half of the New Orleans metro area, maybe even the North Shore, but then into Mississippi when you get into Harrison and Hancock counties, which includes Ocean Springs, it includes Pass Christian, Waveland, Biloxi, Gulfport, maybe even Pascagoula. The threat for 100 mile per hour wind gusts this evening. Looks like the worst for New Orleans will be between 5 and 7, 6 and 8 for the North Shore, 7 and 9 for coastal Mississippi, and then later we should see the winds weakening as the storm exits to the right and to the northeast. Now let's take a look back at the rest of the southeast, because I think this is something that's pretty important I want to point out to y'all. This is weathermodels.com. I don't know why we're so slow today. We'll get in on that. Well, let's take a look at the NAM because it does a pretty good job in holding things together. Yeah, Pensacola is definitely going to get hit pretty hard with tropical storm wind. Not going to get the worst of the wind, I don't think, but definitely wind and some storm surge. And it's like you guys just got hit with Sally and you're still cleaning up from that. All right, so let's look at the rest of the southeast. We're going to take a peek here at the Carolinas. I think we had where we are. There we go. North Carolina. And that includes South Carolina. And we're going to take a look at wind speeds here, and they stay pretty light today. Should be a decent day. And then as we head into tonight, we see a little bit more wind. Okay, this is the wrong model, the NCEP NAM. I need to get the NAM Con US. All right, let's get the wind gusts. All right, here we go. All right, so winds are going to start picking up overnight southwest of the Carolinas. This is midnight, and you can see we could have a few gusts up to about 20 miles per hour, mainly across the mountains here. But into the Piedmont tomorrow morning, it should start getting windier. Now, if you look at Atlanta down here, if you're familiar with Atlanta, there is a possibility as the center of this storm moves towards Atlanta that winds could gust over 60 miles per hour, which will cause widespread power outages to Atlanta. If you go on to the next hour, this is quickly advancing, so upstate South Carolina at 9 in the morning tomorrow could have wind gusts up to 65 miles per hour for 9 and 10 a.m. Then this advances onto the foothills of western North Carolina. And then as we get close to the Piedmont Triad, Winston-Salem, Lexington, Hickory, Statesville could have wind gusts approaching 70 miles per hour for a brief amount of time, which can cause widespread power outages in this zone in here. We actually have an article on CarolinaWX.com talking about these locally damaging winds. And you can see this article Mike put out talks about this damaging wind swath. I think we're going to maybe expand it a little bit east depending on what this NAM model is showing, if it's right, because certainly it's going to be windy on the mountains because of the elevation they have, but the foothills into the western Piedmont could get in on this. And as we head towards tomorrow afternoon, actually late tomorrow morning, this is tomorrow afternoon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, those winds expand into the triangle and areas northward into Virginia, maybe 50 mile an hour wind gusts all the way up to Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Emporia, those areas in the afternoon could have wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. So I think a lot of folks could have power outages tomorrow morning in upstate South Carolina and western North Carolina, and then into the Piedmont towards midday, and then into southeastern Virginia in the afternoon. For Darlington, Florence, those areas, winds could briefly gust past 40 miles per hour. It doesn't look like it's going to be as big an issue that far south and east. Coastal areas aren't going to get hammered too hard until you get up to the Virginia Tidewater, but the Outer Banks towards evening may see wind gusts to 50 miles per hour as this storm center is moving over the lower Chesapeake Bay and approaching coastal eastern Maryland. Charleston, South Carolina, Lee, looking like you're going to be okay at this point. It'll get windy for a period tomorrow morning around late morning into lunchtime, maybe some gusts over 30 miles per hour. But I don't think you're going to be in the heart of the worst of it. I think that's going to end up coming up from Atlanta to Greenville, Spartanburg, especially the mountains, so Seneca, Fairplay, those areas, maybe getting up to Lincolnton, Statesville, Winston-Salem, Danville, those areas in Virginia, and then eventually perhaps affecting southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina later in the day. I also want to show you guys tornado potential because I think that's something we need to talk about a little bit more. And that's one thing we'll have to keep an eye on. I don't think quite so much tonight, but during the day tomorrow when we get a little bit of surface heating, this is 9 a.m., 10 a.m., we don't really have a tornado threat. We may start to see that threat increase a little bit in the eastern Carolinas later in the morning. So that's something we'll have to watch. And these are from low top thunderstorms that could come out ahead of the circulation. But as we head into the afternoon, I think the threat for tornadoes isn't super high, but I would not be shocked if we saw one or two of them, and that includes the eastern Carolinas and southeastern Virginia during the afternoon tomorrow. So that's something we'll watch for. The Storm Prediction Center, I think, just has a marginal risk at this point for us. But it does include pretty much all of central and eastern North Carolina, everywhere except the coastal section of South Carolina and Wilmington. So maybe this is more of an issue where we could have a slight risk put out in here, near and to the south and east of Raleigh, as we're going to get some daytime heating. And I think tornadoes and winds are going to be the main threat. We shouldn't have any hail to worry about. Rappahannock River, I think you're okay. It'll get windy in the afternoon. You definitely have your share of rain. But as far as severe weather goes, I don't think that's going to be too big an issue. I'm going to take a look at rainfall totals here because that's important as well. And you can see we're expecting the rain to start to move into the area in the western Carolinas this afternoon and tonight, advancing into Virginia. And then the rest of the North Carolina tomorrow morning will be dealing with rain picking up. Really doesn't look to be too darn heavy across the eastern Carolinas. We're just going to see scattered showers. But in the western Carolinas, we have the threat for as much as 8 inches in the mountains. So there are flood watches out for the western Carolinas, as well as northern Georgia, upstate South Carolina. Definitely flash floods could be a problem here with the worst of that rain coming tomorrow morning, it looks like. It'll be late tonight in northern Georgia and then tomorrow morning across the western Carolinas. And then all that rain heads up into Virginia as well. So we could have a couple of inches north of Richmond, up into D.C., Baltimore, and those areas there as well. And I'm going to wrap this up here pretty soon because I have to get going. But this storm's mainly going to be known for the fact that it's moving so quickly. The other thing I will show you all real quick, because this is kind of crazy, if I can. Not sure what's going on with my models here. European model. Check this baby out. We've got ourselves some winter as well. Not in the Carolinas, sorry, but in the Northeast. Let me see if this is loaded yet. It may or may not be. I'm having internet slowdowns here. All right, here we go. So, as Zeta moves northeast, there's a system behind it that's going to accelerate it northeast, and we are looking at some snow falling late tomorrow night and into Friday morning in parts of New England and upstate New York. And then as we head further into Friday, and especially Friday night, this has the looks of a pre-Halloween snowstorm to it. Some of these areas could end up getting maybe as much as a foot of snow in some of these higher elevations here, so it could be pretty crazy. So, we'll leave that with you here. All right, that's not what I wanted to put up. Let's also talk about this next system in the tropics real fast, because there's always a next one. This would be potential Eta, and the GFS parallel doesn't do much about developing it through the weekend, but does have potentially a tropical storm forming here on Monday next week. And this thing deepens pretty quickly over the western Caribbean and then stalls near the coastline of not Honduras, but Nicaragua. And shows a due west moving storm which could produce Category 2 like winds across the Nicaraguan coast, and then that moisture is eventually coming up into the southern Gulf. So never say die is what our mantra is for this hurricane season. The GFS operational also showing some development here in the southwestern Caribbean in the middle of next week, but a weaker system coming across Central America, which is going to produce a lot of rain. But it's showing more systems forming. Here's another one in the Eastern Caribbean near Puerto Rico, and this trough out here should kick it up the East Coast and away from land, which would be good news. But if you're in Florida, you need to watch both of these just in case, because I will tell you, the GFS 10, 14 days out is going to stink. It's not going to do a very good job in trying to figure out where everything gets steered. I mean, there could be high pressure building in here, and that could take something up into the southeastern Gulf or on the Atlantic side of things. So I know we've been lucky in Florida so far, but I would not rule it out at this point. All right, well, I'm going to have to get running, everyone. But real quick, again, we are looking at the threat for some wind and wind gusts that could get over 50 miles per hour, even 75 miles per hour across the mountains of southwestern North Carolina during the day tomorrow. Actually, these are in knots, so multiply that by 15% higher, and we're looking at wind gusts over 50 miles per hour in the Piedmont Triad and west of Charlotte, over 60 in upstate South Carolina, over 70 in the mountains of North Carolina, perhaps hurricane force across southern Alabama, and of course we're looking at hurricane conditions on the east side of New Orleans with wind gusts in excess of 100 miles per hour this evening. But as fast as it moves in, it's going to be as fast as it leaves here in North Carolina. All right, any other questions before we wrap things up here? Okay, so once again, we are watching Hurricane Zeta strengthening. It's now a high-end Category 1 storm in the Central Gulf, likely to become a Category 2 before landfall. The latest hurricane center has 90 miles per hour, pressure slowly dropping now at 978 millibars, and we're looking at peak wind surge of 6 to 9 feet, which has been forecasted up from this time yesterday. So 9-foot storm surge possible here around past Christiane and maybe around Biloxi and maybe around Pascagoula. 4 to 6 feet siphoning up the Mobile Bay, 2 to 4 feet Pensacola Bay, 3 to 5 feet for the eastern side of the Mobile metropolitan area, including Gulf Shores and Baldwin County, 5 to 7 feet for Lake Borgne, as well as Barataria Bay and the mouth of the Mississippi, 3 to 5 feet for Lake Pontchartrain, and certainly that can cause some flooding in the New Orleans area as the wind's going to be turning around behind the system tonight. So New Orleans could have some coastal flooding behind the worst of the weather, whereas areas on the North Shore will have it earlier in the evening. Places like Slidell and Mandeville and Madisonville could have some of that. And areas well to the east of Pensacola could have storm surge all the way to Yankeetown, past the Big Bend of Florida. So that's something